Podcasts on unctv.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
Good evening, friends. Allison Perkins is the new executive director of the Reynolda House Museum of American Art in Winston-Salem. She had an extensive experience in art in Dallas, and Omaha, Baltimore, and other parts of the United States and the world. We look forward to meeting and talking with her in just a few seconds.
Sponsored in part by Wachovia, a Wells Fargo company, helping North Carolina people realize their financial goals since 1879. And through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
We welcome you to North Carolina people. I'm sorry I haven't gotten over to see you before now, but thank you for joining us on this. We're doing this on St. Patrick's Day, and I'm glad to know that Tom Lambeth was the chairman of the committee that found you and brought you to North Carolina. He's a great citizen.
He is indeed. And in fact, Tom Lambeth will be the incoming chair of our board at Reynolda House starting on July 1.
Well, I'm glad you've got him at work studying art now.
We do.
Everything I read that you sent and shared with us dealing with American art, which is, of course, I'm sure the favorite of most people viewing this program. Allison, how did you get so interested in this?
Well, American art has always been a true passion of mine, and it has developed and evolved over time as a result of the different institutions I've had the pleasure of working in. And I would say I probably cut my teeth at one particular institution in Fort Worth, Texas, the Amon Carter Museum, which is dedicated to American art, painting, sculpture, prints, and photography. And I've learned so much from the people with whom I've worked, from curators, and I've learned from just exploring those collections and working as an educator and translating great ideas about American art and our culture. And that's one of the key attractions for me in working at Reynolda House.
Well, let's go back to that even. Where did the original impetus in your life in art, what happened?
Well, as a child, I moved all over the country with my family about every 3 to 4 years. And that made me be a very adaptable person. I learned that change was always around the corner, and it was going to be new and exciting, and I would be surrounded by the comfort and love of my parents and my family. And after a succession of several moves around different regions of our country, by the time I reached high school, we had a great, bold move to London. And so if you can imagine, as a high school student, going to London was just about the thrill of a lifetime. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough in my senior year in high school to take an elective course that lasted the entire year in art history. And I have to admit that the sort of carrot at the end of that stick was that we were all promised a trip to Florence, Italy at the end of a year's worth of study. And that was certainly an enticement for me. But London was really an extension of the classroom experience. So our assignments were given to us. We were assigned works of art at the National Gallery and at the Tate. And we had to present to our peers in a museum setting. And I so enjoyed that I think at that point in time, the seeds of my career were planted.
Well, there's no city like London.
No, indeed. And it was. I think my passion and interest in history developed as a result of living there.
Well, that's an interesting story, but your mobility around made you someone who's very conversant with regions of this country, too. That helps, but let's concentrate on Reynolda now for a minute. I just learned from you that you have a working affiliation with Wake Forest University now.
We do, and in fact, we have had a long relationship with Wake Forest University, but it was formalized in 2002 when we became affiliated. And what that affiliation means is that we can be somewhat interdependent upon one another. Reynolda House has extraordinary assets in American art and in an American country estate that was, as we know, established by Catherine and R.J. Reynolds. And in bringing these resources together, the academic community of Wake Forest and the great art assets of Reynolda House, we have tremendous synergy in drawing upon the talented faculty of the university to come and interpret works of art at the museum, to engage students in the pleasure of learning about American art history and the ideas that really shaped our country that are mirrored in the collections that we showcase at Reynolda House.
I don't know how many of them, I just read the list of the American painters you have there. It's enormous, from Georgia O'Keeffe to the great Hudson Valley painters and all through.
Yes.
Scholars come there to study these paintings with you?
They do. We bring scholars in to lecture as a result of our public programming, but we also collaborate with Wake Forest and work together to bring scholars into the community, into the campus community. But we also are always working to advance our understanding of the collections we have. And we do that through a variety of means. One example is, and this really demonstrates the union between the university and the museum, we're using as the centerpiece for our first-year student orientation program this fall in August 2010. We'll be welcoming the Wake Forest class of 2014 at that time. Instead of using a common reader, as many universities use, we're going to use as our focal point for these students a work of art at Reynolda House. And we're selecting the Andes of Ecuador, which is a great masterwork by Frederick Church. It's part of the Hudson River School of Artists. And we're going to use our faculty talent to help students examine this painting through the lens of literature, through religious thought, through psychology, and we're going to create a series of podcasts that will be delivered to these students prior to entering the university. And when they arrive that first week on campus, they'll have the pleasure of coming to Reynolda and seeing this painting and talking about its meaning through the sort of informed discussion groups with advisors on campus. So we're really excited about using this model.
What an incredible experience. First year, first start.
Yes.
What happens to me then if I'm in the, say, some high school art class and we knock on your door and say, may we come and visit? Do you do something like that for me?
We do indeed, and we welcome students and teachers with open arms, and we work very hard to customize the tour experience for each teacher who calls upon us. We see anywhere from 4,000 to 5,000 students a year, and we very intentionally break them up into very small clusters of students, and they have between an hour to an hour and a half experience, often combined with an art-making studio visit as well within the museum. And we really take time to help them learn from works of art and engage in that creative, reflective thinking that can transpire when you're looking at a great example of American art in the museum.
Let me say for our viewers that when we talk about Reynolda, that was the home of R.J. Reynolds and his wife.
Yes.
And it was really a compound, an estate, really, out on the northern western side of Winston-Salem. Now, today there are lots of little shops there and restaurants there, and there are art studios there. Reynolda itself, is that open to public visitation anytime?
Yes, it is. Reynolda House Museum of American Art is one of really 3 entities that are part of the historic Reynolda estate. And the estate was established by Catherine Reynolds. It was really her vision in 1906. She worked from 1906 to 1917 to create a country estate for her family. And her ideals were to establish a home where she could grow healthy food, have a healthy place to raise her children, and to really improve the lives of citizens in the Piedmont region. So her ideals were vast and really went beyond the bounds of her own family. And she created a model farming community where she invited local farmers to learn the latest crop propagation. So these stories are interwoven into the Reynolda experience today. When visitors come to the museum, they're encouraged to view our galleries and walk through the historic home and imagine what it was like for the Reynolds family and the children to live in this beautiful estate. But then we encourage them to wander through the historic gardens that have been restored and are part of the Reynolda estate. And you mentioned the shops that are a part of Reynolda Village. Reynolda Village was once a working farm. There's a dairy barn and there are cattle sheds and all of those buildings. The blacksmith shop that was Joe King's studio.
Yeah, they were all there.
They were all there. And we want people to experience Reynolda Village and do a little bit of mental time traveling to think about how this functioned as a model farm. But today it's a series of very unique and interesting boutiques and shops and restaurants, and it's a place to just sort of settle in after you relax from a visit in the gardens and the museum. You can have a bite to eat and enjoy the whole Reynolda experience.
Well, it's an art itself.
It
what
is.
she did there, putting it all together, and of course it really is a centerpiece. What do you do with relationship, for example, to Ackland here at the university or Nasher at Duke, these big museum enterprises that are institutionally related as you are?
Yeah.
Do you all exchange, talk, work, get together?
We do, indeed. We try to collaborate with our sister institutions around the state. In fact, we've had staff members from the Nasher come and advise us on how they maintain their relationship with the university and how they manage their membership programs. In fact, we're going to be borrowing some works of art from the Ackland that will be installed in an exhibition at Reynolda in the fall of 2010. So we establish relationships and work collegially with institutions around the state.
The American art and the American artists, they're bound to be different in certain sections of the country. You mentioned Hudson River Valley. I'm sure in the Carter Museum is a lot of the cowboy, the Wild West, emphasis, Great West, I'll say. How many different schools are there of American art? Is there a group, for example, of the Mississippi Valley, the Delta region?
Well, there are a variety of schools, too many for me to name here. But and some of the schools are really defined by region, and some are defined by time period. So there were American regionalists who were primarily from the Midwest, people like Thomas Hart Benton or Grant Wood, both of whom you would find at Reynolda House. And then there were artists working in the mid-20th century, and they're considered sort of modernists. They were moving more in abstract modes of presenting their ideas and creativity versus the more realistic presentations of artists working much earlier in time. So at Reynolda House, you really can experience a collection that spans 4 centuries of American art. Really with the late 1800s all the way up to the early 21st century.
Good. How about Georgia O'Keeffe? Now, there's a very distinct and regionally identified artist. I've seen some of her paintings, just one flower.
Yes.
Stark dramatization. But quite an artist.
She is indeed, and in fact we have a Georgia O'Keeffe pastel at the museum, and I have to say that that's probably the most requested work of art.
Really?
That is requested of us to loan to other museums. And it's been traveling quite a bit in a number of Georgia O'Keeffe shows that have been presented nationally, both in New York and Washington, D.C., and out in Santa Fe at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum.
Now I want to go back a little bit to another North Carolina connection you have that I read about. The Cone sisters, when you were in Baltimore, and they were a very unique part of the American art experience, but they were also very European and lived in France. What about your collection of their collection in the city of Baltimore?
Well, the Cone sisters, Clara Bell and Etta Cone, lived in Baltimore, And they traveled to Europe and began to establish a collection in the early 1900s. They never married. They had the freedom and the time and the resources to make these excursions abroad. And they befriended artists like Matisse, Henri Matisse, and Pablo Picasso. They were well acquainted with Gertrude Stein, who really gained entree into these artist studios. And they established, I think, one of the most important American-based collections of European modern art in this country. And fortunately for the city of Baltimore and the Baltimore Museum of Art, where I once worked, they gave their entire collection to that institution. And as a result, in Baltimore, they have the world's largest collection of Matisse works anywhere in the world.
So we're talking about the Cone family of Greensboro, really.
Absolutely. And the Cone family, I'm sure many people, I mean, one of my first visits when I moved to North Carolina, I sort of drew upon my Baltimore connections, and I said to my husband and my children, we need to go to Blowing Rock because I want to see the Cone family homestead.
Some place.
It is indeed.
That's
what a beautiful place.
Beautiful location up there. Well, how about school children now? Do you work aggressively to get them aware of their heritage in American art?
We do, and that's a great story for us to share at Reynolda House, because we not only explore themes in American art and culture and history, but we bring them a little closer to home, to their own history in Winston-Salem, by examining a great industrial entrepreneur like R.J. Reynolds, and really his wife Catherine in her own sort of community entrepreneurism in establishing Reynolda. We have a great story to tell, and I think that's one of the fascinating aspects of Winston-Salem as a community. Our institutions reflect the threads of our history all across the city, from Old Salem to Reynolda House to Tanglewood Park, and the School of the Arts, to the fact that the first arts council in the nation was established in Winston-Salem. We're claiming our city in Winston-Salem as a city of arts and innovation. And those ideas flourish in every cultural institution across the city.
Is that the work of the Haynes family? In great measure, I've known that family and their work and their interest in the arts.
Yes, and certainly Philip Haynes has been behind the impetus. He was the major impetus for establishing the first arts council in the country. He was a national figure
in art all over, but I'm glad to know he's so interested in the American art.
Well, and I think at Reynolda House we've been able to sort of connect all these threads across the community. We very much enjoy a number of collaborations at the museum with our sister institutions, whether it's with the Winston-Salem Symphony or the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, and hosting a Cinema Under the Stars in the summer months at Reynolda, which is, we feature films outdoors.
All right, it won't be long. You're celebrating your 50th anniversary. What are we going to expect here?
Well, in 2017, the museum celebrates its 50th anniversary as a Museum of American Art, but it's also the centennial of the historic estate. And so I think that's an important milestone to reach for. And one of the things we're doing to prepare for that great celebration is we're conducting a cultural landscape report, which really is a research documentation process of examining the entire historic district of Reynolda, looking at the changes that have transpired over time, and thinking about how we'd like to envision this entire estate as an experience for visitors and citizens across the state of North Carolina. And we'd like to make that a seamless experience and do a better job at attracting people to this beautiful country estate where they can learn, imagine, and find meaning in many different aspects of American life and art.
It isn't fair to ask you which of the American artists is your personal favorite, but it is fair to ask you this. Can't the average student find there a really instructive experience in the course of the development of this country? Can't you see, as we moved west and then became more of the industrialized nation, all of these are expressed so vividly in art collections. You've got it there, haven't you?
We do, and we're able to tie in those important moments in our country's history with the study and curriculum that teachers are working with in their classrooms. So when a teacher calls, we work so carefully with them to ensure that the experience we deliver at Reynolda is in direct correlation to the things that they're teaching and really correlating to the students' interests. You know, it's really important to capture the imagination and creativity of our young citizens, to help them consider how they grow and how they will make a difference in their own communities and and the lives of others in the future.
Do you feel really that there's an appreciation for American art to the degree that you'd like to see in the country now, and what you've traversed the nation?
Oh, I do. And I think one way to demonstrate that is to think when Barbara Babcock Milhouse, the founder of Reynolda House, and she's the granddaughter of R.J. and Catherine, when she established this collection, that was in the mid-1960s. American art was barely on the map then, and it was very affordable. And what Barbara set out to do is buy the best American art she could find. Today, these works of art are hands down some of the finest we can find in the entire Southeast region, and they are indeed being celebrated across museums all over the country.
You've been in our state now for a period of time. Where do we need to do more in North Carolina? Is it in the schools teaching art, American art, or are the universities doing enough? Or how do you assess our state right now from your historic knowledge and point of vantage?
Well, first of all, I'm very proud to be a North Carolina citizen. This is one of the
Good.
smoothest transitions I've ever made in all the moves of my lifetime. I think we do an extraordinary job in the arts, whether it's visual art, dance, music, theater. I'm very proud of what we've accomplished in my own community of Winston-Salem. But I do think as a community and as a state, it's really important to invest in the future of our citizens. And to do that and do it really well, we must invest in their education. And I'm a great believer that the arts can make a profound difference in one's lifetime. And particularly if the arts are experienced with an older adult in a child's life. Because if a child is engaged at a young age and they're doing that with their parents or their grandparents, they can turn to that adult and say, take me again to the symphony, take me again to the art museum. And when you share that experience with a loved one or an important mentor in your life, you're more apt to do it again. And research proves that you're more apt to be a participant in the arts when you grow up and mature as an adult.
And that result is often obtained when there's that kind of community spirit. Winston-Salem has always struck me as a place where art was really important, and it meant a lot in the schools. It meant a lot in the creation of the School of the Arts. But Salem College, Wake Forest, Winston-Salem State, all those institutions for Sci-Tech, art was a part of their very well-being. You found that to be continuing true?
I do, and in fact we have collaborations with all of the institutions that you've named, and the faculty at those 4 schools are engaged in sending their students across the community to Reynolda House, to Old Salem, to all of our other arts institutions in town, and supporting college students and their learning within their own community, but as a part of their university studies.
I know you're going to be busy now getting ready for that big anniversary, but as you look ahead, what would you hope to see North Carolina as a state do more in the arts that we aren't doing? If you were writing the prescription yourself, what would it say?
That's a great question, and I think that I would encourage the arts institutions to collaborate with one another, because I'm a great believer that collaboration brings strength to strength and makes you even more powerful. And across our great state, we have a remarkable number of arts organizations. We have a great arts council. We have a terrific Department of Cultural Resources that corrals all of our arts programs. But I think we can share our expertise and share our programming with one another and learn from one another. I'm an educator deep in my heart, and I think that that would be a wise way for us to use our resources, our time, and our energy.
Well, Allison Perkins, we want to thank you for coming to North Carolina, for what you do at Reynolda House, and we all look forward to your 50th anniversary in not too many moons ahead. Thank you for this interview, and friends, I know you've enjoyed meeting this new and very talented member of our art community in North Carolina. Till next week then, good night.
Sponsored in part by Wachovia, a Wells Fargo company, helping North Carolina people realize their financial goals since 1879. And through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV.
Podcasts on unctv.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV.